I'm Charlie, I'm an alcoholic. I did get a jacket. It was very nice. This is how I was introduced to this retreat. I'd never been in Georgia before except Atlanta Airport. Everybody's been to the Atlanta Airport, but I'd never been in Georgia before. This is my first time here. I love it here. This is nice. This is nice. So when they told me about, we would like you to come talk at the retreat, I said, well, what's it like? And they said, and I quote, it's a men's retreat out in the woods. So I didn't bring a jacket. So my idea of dressing up is I took my baseball cap off. I live on a little tiny island, so. But this is a very nice coat. You'll see it again tomorrow morning, and Cody will be wearing it. Okay. So I'm Charlie Hill. I'm an alcoholic. So far, everything I said is true. I got sober. My sober date is November 19th of 1979. This is a personal best for me. I get really nervous when I speak, and I also have allergies. And you guys have some pollen here. I've never. Wow, I'm going to take some home and spray it on people. Anyway, so I'm going to play our national anthem. Okay. So, who's the timer? Who's going to hold the sign up? Who is that? Good, he's not here. Okay, well, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to tell you what my experience is, my experience, strength, and hope. What I like to do is share, like it says in the big book, in a general way, what I was like and what happened, what it's like now. Because there have been some really great speakers this weekend, some tremendous workshops. My friends were asking me, how is it? And I said, spiritually, it's like trying to take a drink out of a fire hydrant. There's just so much going on, and there's so much interaction between people, so many newcomers, and so many people being brought in here. It was just a wonderful experience that I've had so far. So my job is to just tell you, to be an example of what's possible if you stick around here. If you're new here, God bless you. This is the most fun you'll ever have in your life with your clothes on, is Alcoholics Anonymous. I read something before I speak because my sponsor told me to. And he told me a long time ago. I've been reading it for years. And it's from page 95 of the big book. And it's halfway down the paragraph, and it says, you'll be most successful with alcoholics if you do not exhibit any passion for crusader reform. Never talk down to an alcoholic from any moral or spiritual hilltop. Simply lay out the kit of spiritual tools for his inspection. Show him how they worked with you. Offer him friendship and fellowship. Tell him if he wants to get well, you do anything to help. And that's what I want to do here tonight. And I owe everything I have to Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm the lucky guy. I shouldn't be here. I have a sponsor. His name's Marty Steckdop, and he's an Eskimo. And that's what he calls himself, so that's how I call him. He's an Eskimo. And he he told me to not mess up, but not in those words tonight. I've had 5 sponsors, excuse me, and I'll get into that in a minute. But I live in Bokeelia, Florida, and so by show of hands, how many people have been into Bokeelia, Florida? Anybody? Look at that. Okay, so nobody in this room has been to Bokeelia, Florida. So it's between Tampa and Naples, and if you're ever in Florida, please come by. It's a little tiny island. We have one 4-way stop sign. We have 16 members of Alcoholics Anonymous there, and we're dying for somebody to come visit. So it's like, oh, a visitor, and then we'll let you talk. So you didn't get my number from Josh, and thank you, Josh. You didn't need to make an amends. I should know better. But I learned a very good lesson here. I'll never go anywhere to speak again without the rack with me. So it's what is it? It's always us. It's never them. I should have paid attention. So I was born in Southern California, in Compton, California. Real high rent area. And then, and from there we moved to Chino, another high rent area. And then we got chased out of town because Dad couldn't pay the rent. We wound up in the desert outside of Las Vegas, Nevada. It sounds glamorous. It was 1954. Put my timer on. It was 1954. There was nothing going on in Las Vegas. The only thing we had was the atomic test site. And every now and then they would tell us when it was going to happen. So we'd get up early in the morning and look to the north and watch the sunrise. Could have something to do with why I'm here. But there was nothing going on. This is 6 years after Bugsy Siegel, and Las Vegas was just a little tiny. It was 30,000, 40,000 people in the valley at that time. So, and we lived we were living there because my dad drank up all the money. My dad was a great guy. He really was. He was a Jekyll and Hyde drunk. He could sing like a bird, tell great stories, and everybody loved him. Everybody out there loved him. At home, we got the other guy, the other Jekyll and Hyde, whichever was the bad one. We got that one at home. And I never wanted to be anything like my dad. I understand what was going on with him now. He was a World War II guy, Korea War, blue-collar guy, truck driver. Bless you. And but he beat my mom and scared us kids, and I didn't want to be nothing like him. So now we are in Nevada. And the reason we're in Nevada is because my mom was an Al-Anon. And in 1947, she met Elsa Chamberlain, who was Chuck Chamberlain's wife, a big name in Southern California, and tried to get my dad sober. And my dad said, okay, I want to get sober. And he couldn't do it. And he came to Alcoholics Anonymous meetings from 1947 until 1975. And he could never get more than 90 days. He was so clever. He'd always come home and he'd make jokes about the meeting. Bob's drunk again, and everybody's all tore up. And he was just so clever. He couldn't get sober. His brother my Uncle Carl was a heroin addict. And my uncle starts going with my dad to the AA meetings in Southern California in the 40s and early 50s. And he's just there to support my dad, and he gets clean and sober. There's no NA back then, And he died clean and sober with 13 years. My dad not so lucky. My dad died on the streets in 1975 across the street from the Salvation Army yard after hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of Alcoholics Anonymous meetings. So being in AA doesn't guarantee squat. It's what we do in here that guarantees it. I'm just trying to cheer up the newcomers. So I got it from him, I guess. And I was lucky enough. I got sober. I've had just a wonderful, wonderful life of being sober. But I paid the tab to get here. We lived in this homestead. A homestead is in Nevada. Nobody wanted to live there, so if you built a little 500 square foot house and you had an outhouse and hauled your own water and had oil lamps, things like that, they would give you the 5 acres around it. So it was my uncle's homestead, and he gave it to my dad. And we moved in there, and it was near Decatur and Sahara, if anybody's been to Las Vegas. So right now, it'd be worth a fortune. My second wife would have got it, but, Anyway, so we're living in this place, and we're lighting oil lamps. We're hauling water in 50-gallon drums. We're hauling ice to keep the food cold. We had no interior walls. What we did was we put up blankets. And the blankets so we could have some privacy. My sister was 8 and I was 6. And it was the best place to be a kid. I mean, you could go out the back door of this homestead and go off in any direction in 20 miles. I mean, it was the best. We chased snakes and scorpions and turtles and lizards, and it was so great. Going to the bathroom at night out back wasn't that great, but that part was great. And then I went to school, and I did not know I was poor. See, I thought I didn't know that until I got to school, and then the kids clued me in right away. The kids all pointed out that I was poor, and they would point things out, like, you know, you want to do a sleepover, and I'd go over to their house, and they would have walls and bathrooms and inside the house and stuff like that. So I felt less than, and feeling less than, I would watch people. I would watch how people acted, and I would act like I thought they wanted me to act so that I could be their friend. And that is how I ran my life till I was 5 years sober. I was a chameleon. I just did what I thought you wanted me to do. Somehow my dad, I know my dad was a drunk because we lost a free house. We had to move out. And so we moved out, and we moved to Gangland in North Las Vegas, and it was a tough area, tough. And I was not tough. I was not a fighter. And so I was terrified all the time. And everybody was tough. The girls were tough. I was quick, though. I was the second fastest guy in my high school. There was only one guy faster than me. I was quick out of the hole. Bucci Carter was faster than me. He was a running back for the football team. And I made friends with Bucci Carter. Everybody else, here was the deal. I'll fight you, but you got to catch me. So, you know, if you said, hey, and I stay, hey, and as soon as we squared off, I'm gone. And then I would torture them. You know, I would just run out of reach a little bit, you know, till they were exhausted and holding on to their knees and dry heaving. And then I'd circle around them a couple times and going home. So some of those guys didn't take well to that, and they would sneak up on me. So I got punched out a lot from the blind side. I never really participated in any fights when I was a kid. I participated in a few beatings, but no fights. So this is me. I'm 13 years old. I'm in junior high school, and I'm going to a junior high school dance. And this is in the old days. And I'm afraid of everybody pretty much. I'm just squirrely, just quick. And these guys said, hey, come on out in the parking lot. I went out in the parking lot with them, and they passed around a bottle of 10 High whiskey. And the reason I tell you this story is because all I want to do is qualify to tell you anybody can get sober. So we passed around this bottle of 10 High whiskey, and the first drink did nothing, the second drink did nothing, and the third drink qualifies for me to stand here and talk to you gentlemen. Because on the third drink, standing with a couple of guys that I was terrified of, really, all of a sudden, my shoulders dropped, and I just took a breath. And it was like I'd been holding my breath for 13 years. And we finished the bottle. We passed it around a little bit more. And the more I drank, the better I felt. And I looked at these guys that I was afraid of just a couple of minutes ago, and I'm thinking, you know, these guys are lucky I'm here. You know, let's go do something. And we went into the dance, and there was this one guy that used to sneak up and thump me. He's big, like that. You know, no light escaped his gravitational field. He's just enormous, and he would punch me out, you know, from the blind side. And he's standing by the door, and he's looking at me. And I'm looking at him, and I went, what are you looking at? Just like that. And he goes, what? Because he's not used to me talking like that. I said, you heard me. What are you looking at? And he goes, nothing. I stumped him, I think is what happened. And he said, nothing. I said, that's right. And I just went on into the dance. And I wasn't delusional drunk or nothing. I did not think I could beat that guy up. He could have beat me to death. But I wasn't afraid of him. Can you feel that? Man, I was not afraid of him. God, what a great drug alcohol is. Alcohol is a miraculous drug. I've spent 13 years being afraid, and within an hour, I was not afraid of that guy. I was not afraid of girls. I was always afraid of girls, and I'd go ask them to dance. If I asked them to dance and they said no, and it would just crush me, and they would go and point at me and stuff. But this time I asked a girl to dance, and she said no, and I went, and I went and asked another girl to dance. And I got really good at that girl thing. In fact, I spent 6 years in high school because of it. I got a junior pregnant, and back then we didn't have baby mamas, so we got married. And then a year later, we realized we were both just children ourselves, and we got a divorce, and I went back to high school as a divorcee paying child support. And it wasn't that big a deal. At Rancho High School, we had daycare. But and I finished up high school. I finished high school. I got out of high school, and I got in trouble with the law. I won't go into it, but it wasn't real good. But back in there, and Vietnam was going on, and there used to be a kind of a deal where if you got in trouble with the law and you would join the military, they would make that go away. There's some guys old enough to remember those days, and that's what I did. I joined the United States Army to escape a year in the Clark County Jail. And I liked the Army. I liked it because it was structured. You do this, you get that. I was lonely, though, so I married another girl out of Rancho High School. I interview well. So the problem is they married the guy that interviewed, and I'm not that guy. So I got married, went over to Europe, Czechoslovakian border, Army, Air Corps kind of thing, helicopters. Came back to Las Vegas and became a dice dealer. And if you're not done drinking, some of you new guys want to finish it off really good, go to Vegas, become a dice dealer. If you can deal dice, they really don't care if you're drunk. They just care if you show up on time with the right uniform on. And that's really the only criteria for keeping a job there. And so that's what I did. I worked in the 70s when the mob owned Las Vegas, and we made a lot of money. We made it sometimes $100, $500, $1,000 a night or more in tips and no taxes. So I used to always make fun of my dad because he couldn't get home with a check. I wouldn't make that kind of money and not get home with the tips. I was just like my dad. I was crazy. I was just absolutely insane. I did enough drugs and alcohol. I was so crazy. I was a vomiter. I remember one time we went out, before we went to the discos, we went to this lady's house. She was just a nice lady. We went there, hi, first time I ever met her, hi, how are you? Just like Wally Cleaver, hello, thank you very much. And I sit down and she had some scotch, whiskey, which is my drug of choice. And so I drink this scotch whiskey, and I says, can I use your bathroom? She says, certainly, and I go in to use her bathroom. And while I'm in there, the first thing I did was I closed the door and I turned the faucet on so she could not hear me open up the medicine chest, because I wanted to check in there, because sometimes they leave expired drugs in there, and those are dangerous. So she did. She had a bunch of Percodans. So then they were outdated. Now, come on, if they expire. Okay, how many people here had drugs in their medicine chest that expired? So she's not going to miss them. So I ate them all, and I come back out and I'm talking to this lady. A minute ago I was Wally Cleaver. Now my tongue's stapled to my molar. And I said, I know what I said. I said, I need to go back to the bathroom. What I really said was, and I go back to the bathroom, and I'm throwing up in her toilet. And I'm hanging on, just vomit, where you think your colon's coming out. I'm holding on, and I noticed that all around the inside of her toilet, she had these unsightly rust stains. I can remember thinking to myself, what a pig this woman is. So my thinking was just a little bit off. I just did weird things. I went into work one time. I worked at 7 o'clock at night, and I came out of a blackout, and then it was 6:45, so I got dressed and went to work. It was 7 in the morning, so I clocked in 12 hours early. They just sent me home. And then one time I called in sick on my day off, But that was just a mess. Anyway, so let me get sober here real quick. By this time, I'm on wife number 3, which is not true. The neighbor was on wife number 3, as a matter of fact. But, it's funny now. But, so I was just in bad shape, and so I went down to join Alcoholics Anonymous. And I joined Alcoholics Anonymous initially on December 11th, in 1978. And I went in because I was a weekend dad. I had these wives, they had kids, somebody else was raising them. And I wanted to see them, and I was no longer allowed to see them on holidays because I would tell my kids, I'm going to be there. I'll be there on your birthday. I love you, I love you. I'm going to be there on your birthday. And I wouldn't show. And the wives just got fed up with it, and they told me I was 86. I couldn't do it anymore because I would break those kids' hearts. I would tell them I love them, I'd tell them I'm going to be there, and I'd leave them at the glass waiting for Dad, and I wouldn't show up. So they said, just don't tell them anymore. So I was cut off from Thanksgiving, Christmas, and all those holidays with my kids. So I really wanted to see my kids. And I told my ex-wives, I said, listen, I'm in that A&A thing now, and I'm going to sober up. And can I see my kids on Christmas? So the deal was they were going to come over Christmas Day. And I go buy some bicycles. And I'm trying to all I got to do is put 2 weeks together. If I can stay sober 2 weeks, I see my kids. And the closer it gets to Christmas, you know how it is with 11, 10, 9 days. It's like, golly, just get off my back. I told you I'd be sober. So Christmas Eve, somebody came by, an Army buddy, and he had some Scotch whiskey, my drug of choice. And I took a shot of Scotch whiskey just to take off the edge. And you could have put a lie detector on me. It wouldn't have moved. I'm just going to take off the edge so I can put these bicycles together. And I don't remember Christmas Day. I don't know what happened, but 2 of my kids I didn't get to see for 8 years. I don't remember New Year's Day. I don't remember much of anything. I could not put anything together for you till May 25th of 1979. Just kind of a brownout. So I came in on May 25th and I said, okay, you guys are right. First drink gets you drunk. That's it. I'm in for good this time. And I came all the way in and sat all the way down. But not really. I sat on the edge of my chair mostly. But this time I was a crazy person in AA. I went to meetings, like 3 meetings a day, drink a pot of coffee. And I I did all the functions. I went to 90 dances in 90 days. And then I got sober. I put a month together, and I started feeling pretty good. And then I got 2 months together. So you know what? I got a job. And when I got the job, I dropped a couple of meetings. Instead of 3 meetings a day, I was going to 1 a day. Then I went to 1 every other day. And after 4 months, I was going to 1 meeting a week. Because somebody said, if your home group isn't the best group you ever saw, get another home group. So I said, okay, this is the best group. And I'm going to just go to it. And it was Wednesday night, and that was my 1 meeting a week. So you know where this is going. So now I got 1 meeting a week, and I missed a meeting. Now it's 2 weeks between a meeting. I'm coming up on 6 months sober and 31 years on the planet, my 31st birthday. And I go over to my friend's house with 6 months sober, and I hadn't seen him since I got sober. He says, how you doing? I just bought a brand new Lincoln, because I grew up in poverty, and I have this weird relationship with money. If I have any money, you're going to know about it. I'm going to drive it and pull it out of my pocket. So I bought this brand new Lincoln. It was a brown on brown 1979 Lincoln, wire rims, moon roof. It was 23 feet long. You had to look at it twice, It was just enormous. And so I pull up in this driveway, and he said, how you doing? I said, look at my car. I had a gold watch, bought a new gold watch. And he said, you want to get high? And much like our Saturday night victim speaker, I kind of fancied myself an addict because it has a lot more sex appeal. And this guy knew me from my dope days. And he says, you want to get high? And I said, no, I don't do that anymore. He says, how about some wine? And I said, well, what kind of wine? And he goes, it was a Liebfrau Milch, And I don't think wine's a drink, for starters, So like he was like offering me a soda. He says he showed me the wine, and he was going to toast my 31st birthday with my Army buddy. He's pouring me this glass of wine in a nice glass, my little finger out. And I stopped him at a half a glass because you told me the first drink gets you drunk. I'm having a half a drink. And it's wine. Wine is just not a drink. Unless you twist the top off, that's a drink. But the kind where they swish it around, they go, it's a Beaujolais with a hint of boredom or something. Just shut up. Wine is bong water. So anyway, so I had this half a glass of wine. I drink the half a glass of wine, and it goes to my fingertips, and I go, oh man, I just got to finish the job. So I did. I finished the job. I bought a bottle of Chivas Regal and some growing away pills and ruined my car. My car wasn't insured. I wrecked it. They towed it away. Now I owed the finance company for it. It didn't matter though, because I called my wife. She said, you're drunk, and she changed the locks, locked me out. Couldn't believe that. So I called in sick, and it was a real job, not a dice dealing job, and they fired me for calling in drunk. And then there I am. I'm standing in a phone booth. I had a drink 12 hours after that half a glass of wine. I'm standing in a phone booth, and I lost everything I owned. House, car, job, money, everything. I lost everything I owned in 12 hours, and I am so, so grateful. Because I know guys that they go out and have a drink, and nothing too bad happens. Nothing too bad happens. In fact, when they come back in, they know which halfway house to go to. They got to go to this other halfway house first so they can pick their stuff up to go to the next halfway house. Nothing too bad happens to them. That was my dad. That's why my dad died on the streets. Nothing too bad ever happened to him until the end when he died, and there wasn't enough people to carry the casket. But I got lucky. I got smashed. Yeah. Lucky guy. It got my attention. So on that day, I decided, it says in the book, I had to fully concede to my innermost self that I'm an alcoholic. And on that day, I did. On that day, the most important thing in my life became that I'm not going to take a drink today. I'm not going to take a drink today. If I make it tonight and put my head on the pillow and I haven't had a drink, I win. That's the bottom line. That's the gold standard of sobriety. And I know the book talks about, sobriety isn't enough. Well, pick up a drink and tell me that. So I'm a lucky guy. Lucky guy. I'm in Las Vegas. This is 1980 now. I'm sober about 6 months. And I got a sponsor named Dick Toussaint, a bartender. And I go to after the meetings, I would hang out. Everybody gets their little posses together. We'd go out to the different restaurants and sit in the coffee shops, and they were talking about what step they were on. And they were ahead of me. So I'm on step 3, I'm on step 4. So I go to my sponsor, Dick Toussaint, and I say, Dick, we need to do these steps. And he says, who's this we we're talking about here? He says, I've already done the steps. It seems like you need to do the steps. And because back then it was not common to sit knee to knee and go through the book and do the steps like I do. That's how I do it today. I sit with them and we do the steps. That wasn't like it back then. So what he told me to do was to go to meetings, and when they said, does somebody have a topic, I would tell them whatever step I was on. I'd like to hear about your experience with step 2. And then when I'm done, in other words, to go out and do the step to the best of my ability and bring it back to Dick Toussaint. The first time I went to the meeting and tried that, I'd like to hear about your experience with step 2. Would you like to share? Well, of course. I hadn't done a step yet, but I jumped right in there. And and then I went back to him and said, that didn't work. And I explained what happened. He said, no, you want to hear about their experience with step 2. So I tried that, and then now I got a whole room full of people telling me how to do step 2. And I already picked a guy to tell me how to do step 2. And then finally, he said, you had to say it just like that. I'd like to hear about your experience with step 2. I've already picked a guy to take me through step 2. I don't want to hear what you think I should do to do step 2. I want to hear about your experience with step 2. And in the book it talks about that in so many ways. And Dr. Bob's Nightmare talks about how for the first time he heard from somebody who really knew what they were talking about, what it feels like to have to take a drink at the worst possible moment. Not from reading a book either, just from having that experience. So anyway, I'm working through the steps with Dick Toussaint, and I get a chance to go to Idaho. Sounds like a sentence, doesn't it? It's a beautiful state. I got a chance to go from Las Vegas to go to central Idaho and get into the underground mining deal. I was a gold miner. And me and 2 other guys, we had all these mining claims, and we go up there. First, I went to Dick and I said, I got this chance to go to Idaho. And now normally I would expect him to say, well, you only have 6 months sober. So you need to stay right where you're at. And instead he goes, do you know anybody in Idaho? And I said, no. He said, you should go to Idaho. Because everybody I knew wanted to get me loaded. So I went to Idaho. So we called up Twin Falls, Idaho. And they have a central office there. And we wanted to get a contact for me in Alcoholics Anonymous. So they give me this guy's name, and I go to this little town called Cary, Idaho. And fewer people have been to Cary, Idaho than have been to Bokeelia. It's 125 people. And the only reason we're there is because the gold mine was nearby. And I go there, and we get all settled in, and we're getting ready to set up this mining camp. And I get this guy's address, and he lives next door. So my AA contact with 6 months sober lives next door. I'm so excited, and I go over and knock on the door. Now, when I left Vegas, I was a pit boss. So I gave away all my suits and bought some mining outfits at Kmart and go up to Central Idaho. He answers the door, and he just peeks out the door. He goes, yeah. And I go, well, you know, are you Chuck? And he says, yeah. And I says, are you a friend of Bill W? You're my contact. He goes, well, come on in. But he had his hand back here. I know what that means. And so we go in, and he takes the pistol, he puts it on the end table, and we start talking. And he had been sober about 8 years. It turns out that he had gotten in trouble with a mob girl in Vegas. And I show up in a white-on-white Lincoln from Las Vegas knocking on his door. So he thinks I'm there to whack him, you know. And he never talked to me the whole time I was in Idaho with this guy. He never talked to me without a weapon. He always had a weapon. He always showed it to me before he talked to me. It was like, there was no coffee shop kind of deal going on. And I'm thinking, this sucks. So I call up my sponsor. I said, I don't know what to do. He said, you got to find a meeting. Here's how I stayed sober in the beginning. I got the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, and in the mining camp, there was no other alcoholics, and there's no cell phones, anything like that. And I would read the stories in the back. And I would read them. It's like listening to a speaker meeting. And that was my foundation in Alcoholics Anonymous. But there was a meeting in Ketchum, Idaho, 45 miles away. And I drive through the snow, and I get to this meeting. It was hard to find the meeting. I get there, there's one guy there, and he's listening to a Clancy tape. And I come in, and he says, are you an alcoholic? I go, yeah. And he bless you, he hits the pause button. He says, well, sit down, And there's just one little table, and we got a coffee pot, and he's on one side, I'm on the other. And we each told our story. We had to limit our sharing to 30 minutes. Two of us. So he told his story first. He had a great story. He had a really great AA story from really the old days, the 40s and the 50s. And I thought it was great. And then he asked me to tell my story. And I'm telling my story, and I'm talking about girls. And I was talking about how I did smoke some pot in high school. And he goes like this, hold it right there. We don't talk about that around here. And I'm looking at him, right? Like, there's just two of us, right? And I don't even like pot. I never liked it because it makes me stupid, paranoid, and hungry. But I used it for the interview process with girls. Girls were much easier to interview if they were high, so. He didn't like me. And a lot of people don't like me. I'm a little too happy for some people. This is how I am. I've been around a long time. I'd hate to think I spent the last 46 years miserable. I've been having a good time like this the whole time. And he didn't like it. He thought I was a little too cavalier. And I know he didn't like me because he started another meeting and he didn't tell me. So I found out about it from somebody else, and it was over at this hospital, and I went over to the hospital, and he's there, and there was like 4 people at that meeting, and he looks at me, and I looked at him, and I laughed, and so we sat down after the meeting and talked for a while, and he said, what are you doing? We really got to kind of know each other, and he gave me 5 cassette tapes. The 5 cassette tapes, which a majority of you will not recognize, was Chuck Chamberlain, Clancy, Norm Alpe, Sybil Corwin, and Johnny Harris. And I listened to those guys over and over and over, everywhere I drove around in Idaho. And these guys gave a pitch. When they gave a pitch, they didn't swear. They talked about Alcoholics Anonymous. The goal was to not give any misconceptions about what Alcoholics Anonymous is or does, and to give people hope that this thing will work for them too. And that's I've always been the same way with it. You know, when I come up here, I don't want to embarrass the people that ask me here. I don't think it helps anything to throw a big F-bomb before something. And they don't either. So that was my foundation in AA. I got rich up there. I got rich, well, on paper. And since I come from poverty, the first thing I did was I bought the essentials. I bought an airplane, and I would fly it to meetings. So I'm 3 years sober, and I'm flying to meetings, and I made sure they knew I flew to that meeting. I said, I'm Charlie Hill, I'm an alcoholic, and I flew here on my plane. If you want what I got, just do what I do. But it was the mining business, so we lost all the money. We lost all the money by year 4. Broke. I had to borrow a tank of gas to get out of town. And then great meetings out there. We had such great meetings. Little tiny towns. I love small town AA, where there's 5, 6, 10 people, and everybody knows each other, and yet you're really happy to see them. And like I said, you're glad to see a newcomer or a visitor, so you can judge them for a change. There was a girl there that said she liked me, and I divorced wife number 3 when to move up there. So I married her. I asked her to marry, and took her with me to Reno. How much time do I have left? I don't even know where the timer is. Who is the timer? What I have here is about 15 minutes. Is that about right? Is that good? Okay. All right. No, I have a 1-hour bladder. I am not going over. So anyway, so I married this girl. It was a beautiful wedding. You know, we got married in a field of wildflowers with an old wood church, and afterwards we all held hands and said this serenity prayer, and everything was great. And it was a perfect wedding, except I was in it. There was the only thing wrong with this wedding. And I thought, since I'm sober now I can do the wedding thing. I can do that now. I can be a grown-up. And so well, first I went to Jackpot, Nevada, to get enough money. I started dealing dice there to get to Reno so I could bring her with me. And it was just, she was such a sweet girl. All the women I married were perfect. I loved each one of them. There was nothing wrong with them when I met them. And if you saw them when I met them, you say, this girl's great, you should marry this girl. If you saw them just before I left, you would say, you got to get out of here. She's going to stab you in your sleep. And the only common denominator was me. So we moved to Reno, and I started cheating on her. Bad. I was cheating on her bad. So for the newcomers, I just let you know, this is 42 years ago. I was a much more marketable product, and I had a lot more energy. But I started cheating on my wife, and I cheated on her with 6 women. And I couldn't tell anybody. I couldn't go to meetings and tell that. And I was just dying inside, because I would go to meetings and I would, how you doing? I'm doing great. And I needed some help. I knew I needed some help. I was coming up on 5 years sober. I didn't want to tell the newcomers what I was doing and disappoint them. I was getting ready to drink. In fact, I had a glass of champagne right here. And I saw my reflection in the mirror and saw it, and dropped the glass into the trash and put my clothes on and left. I won't tell you the rest of the story. The next day, I ran into a guy named Dave Hamza. Dave Hamza was a heavyweight boxer. He fought Ezzard Charles, who was a heavyweight champion of the world at the time, and he went the distance. So he was a real deal. I didn't know him from Adam, he asked somebody about me, came up and he gets right in my face, gets right up in my space, and he goes, you're Charlie Hill, aren't you? I go, yeah, and he says, well, looking at me in the eye, and he goes, will the real Charlie Hill please come out of there? And I pushed him. You would have too. And it was a very short scuffle. So the next day I looked for that guy because I wanted to know how this guy picked me out of a crowd. How did he know, even though I had these great outsides going on, how did he know I was dying inside? I was this close to drinking, and I know I would have gone down in flames. And he said, let's go talk. We went to a coffee shop, and in this coffee shop, and he says, what's happening with you? And I told him about these 6 women. And he said, I think you're going to drink. And I think if you drink, you're going to die, and I don't want to watch it. He says, but maybe I can help. And I said, well, help me. He says, do you want me to sponsor you? And I said, yes. And he said, well, ask me. And I said, Dave, will you sponsor me? And he said, are you willing to go to any length to beat alcohol? And I said, yes. And he said, can you follow some simple direction? And I said, yes. And he said, okay, let's talk about these girls. And we had these women, and he wrote it out on a napkin, these women, and he said, you're not having an affair, you're exhibiting serial behavior, and these women deserve to know the truth. They deserve to know what they're dealing with, especially your wife. And I'm thinking about the big book, where it says, except when to do so would injure them or others, we can't get sober at the expense of others. That's where I was going. And then but further down it says, sometimes extreme measures are necessary. It says it in the book. And it didn't matter. I didn't want to argue with Dave anymore because he punches people. So I said, okay, Dave, what do you want me to do? And he says, I want you to tell these women the truth. I will sponsor you if you will tell these women the truth. And I said, I will. He said, great. He says, today. It's 2 p.m, right? He says, I want you to tell these women the truth today. Wow. And I said, okay. And he said, all right, this first girl, what are you going to tell her? And I said, well, I met a girl. She's a lot like you. One thing led to another. He goes, what are you talking about? I said, wow, we're working late at night and we spent a lot of time together. He says, what are you saying? He says, can you tell me the truth? And I could not tell him the truth. So he helped me. He took a napkin out and he wrote down 3 sentences. And the first sentence says, I'm sleeping with other women. And I said, yeah, that's true. The second sentence was, sometimes the same day I'm with you. I said, yeah, that's true. And the last sentence was, I've been lying to you. And I said, yeah, that's all true. And he's looking at the napkin and he goes, that ought to do it. And he handed me the napkin. And he says, do it or don't do it. I don't care. But if you do it, come back and see me and we'll get started. And I went out that day and I told all those women the truth. First door I knocked on. I knew I couldn't go inside, right? I'm smarter. I'm on the porch. She says, what do you want? And I said, you want to come in? No, I don't want to come in. I'm sleeping with other women. Sometimes the same day I'm with you, I've been lying to you. She goes, oh, what are you talking about? I go, well, I met a girl. She's a lot like you. Just like that, man. I just, boom, reverted. And I go, no. I said, I'm sleeping with other women. Sometimes the same day I'm with you, I've been lying to you. I just read the napkin again. So I went all around that day, and I gave that pitch 6 times. What did that say? 25 seconds? 25 minutes? Perfect. I'll get to the gifts. My bladder says 20. So I went through that day and I read that napkin all those times. And at the end of the day, I was so exhausted. They all threw me to the curb. They all told me to hit the road, including the wife. She was very upset. The last place I went to, I was so exhausted. I knocked on the door. She answered the door, and I handed her the napkin. I said, here, read this, And I just laid down on the floor. I was so exhausted. And she told me I can tell this story, you gentlemen. Usually she's in the audience. And she's reading the napkin, and she looks down at me, and she goes, well, we're a lot alike. I was shocked. I thought I was the only one in all of their lives, right? So I was so tired, I stayed there that night. And I stayed there, and we've been together 42 years. So how did that happen, huh? How did that happen? It happened because I didn't want to drink. And I knew that if I followed some simple direction that I could get what you people had. And I wanted that so bad. I just knew I was going to die like my dad. So I followed somebody else's advice. And my life really got interesting. For one thing, I'm staying at her house, and now I got no home, because I can't go back to the house. And I'm staying there, and I went to Dave, and I said, remember I said she's a lot like me, right? And so I go to Dave, and I said, I got to get out of here. She's terrible. And he goes, she's just like you. She said, if you leave her before you make some changes, you're going to wind up with someone just like her. And he says, so write down what you like in a woman, and I did. I wrote down he had me write everything about that woman. I wanted her to be take care of herself, be physically fit, to have some brains, be able to converse, loyal to me, not cheat on me, et cetera, et cetera. And I brought him the list. He says, oh, that's a good list. He says, so can you put your name in front of that list and have it fit you? I go, no. And he said, you can't attract something that you're not. And he says, you got to learn you may as well learn it with her. So she might boot you out, or you might boot her out. But once you try learning how to be honest in a relationship, and that's a novel approach, a novel thing for me, because I could be honest this way. I cheat, and then I tell her. I could call her up right afterwards. Hey, guess what I just did? That's the 10th step. When we're wrong, promptly admit it. Or I could not cheat, and then I have nothing to tell her. Wow, my whole world opened up. Because remember I told you when I was a kid, I acted like I thought you wanted me to act, so that you'd like me. So all these relationships I had, none of them lasted long, because eventually you found out I wasn't that guy. And with her, with that relationship, I learned to be honest. And it was a rocky road in the beginning, the two snakes. One time we were talking together at a meeting, and we decided that God on that day decided to save a lot of people from having terrible relationships by putting her and I together. We saved 12 relationships just on that day. So with rocky start, and we got it dialed in, and I stayed. Obviously I stayed. I'm still with her. Then 3 years later, she shows up in AA. Right? She wasn't an alcoholic when I met her. She got alcoholism. It's a sexually transmitted disease. So she had 3 years after we get together, she's in AA, and we're having a good time. We're going to meetings together, and she just loves it. We don't go to AA together. In fact, we never sit together. We always sit separately, because I've noticed that a newcomer will not usually go up to a couple and ask the gentleman, could I talk to you? If the guy's sitting by himself, it'll happen. So we don't sit together at meetings. She has her program, I have mine. We don't talk about AA. We don't pray together. We don't do any of that stuff together. But we've been just having a great time. We got rich and broke again in Reno. I got into the precious metals business, and then the crash of '87 hit. I have an excellent sense of timing, and broke, really, really broke. So we moved to a little place called Auburn, California. Oh, and so broke. I had all these IRS problems. I won't go into detail, but we had $6 a day to live on. She had a child. We had a St. Bernard Husky, and $6 a day to eat on for a month. And it's just almost impossible. So we're going to meetings. We're both going now. If each of us go to a meeting and put in $1, we got $4 a day to eat on, and that's not possible. So we couldn't put $1 in the basket. And sometimes when people say, hey, put $1 in the basket, I don't do that, because I don't know what their story is. But for 2 years, we didn't have $1 to put in the basket. We were so broke. And I go to the meetings, and they're not doing it right. Anybody here moved? They're not doing it right. And I go there. I got 9 years. Nobody's asking me to sponsor them. I can't get called on. It's just terrible. And I called up my sponsor and I said, this place sucks. And he said, that's not your fellowship. He said, that's their fellowship. He says, you need to get your fellowship. And what your goal should be is to get a fellowship to grow up around you, what it says in the book. And how do I do that? And he says, well, first thing you want to do is you remember people's names. He says, so what I would do is if you were a newcomer and I was coming up to you after the meeting and say, hi, I'm Charlie. How you doing? Here, take my card. Here's my number, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. He says, I want you to go up and call them by name. Hey, Josh, I'm glad you're here and I hope to see you at another meeting. That was the whole pitch. The whole pitch. Hey, Mike, I'm glad you're here and I hope to see you at another meeting. They would look for the guy that remembered their name. And then the next time, I'd say it again and say his name twice, I'm gold. And then I could take him around and introduce him to people, get him some coffee, get him dialed in, get him in the front of the line. And maybe they would ask me to sponsor them. So we got no jobs, and we start sponsoring like 20, 25 people each. We had nothing but time. And they all get jobs, and they're having a great time, and they're going on vacation, and we wanted to go on vacation, but we couldn't afford it. And one night, Irene goes, we have terrible jobs here. Why don't we move to a beautiful place we've never been to before and go there and find a meeting and a job and a place to live in that order? Go to the meeting, put our hands out, get a fellowship to grow up around us, and instead of going on vacation, move somewhere for 3 or 4 years. I thought, man, that's brilliant. So we did. First place we went to was Sedona, Arizona. One of my sponsees sent me a postcard, and when he came back, I said, is it that pretty? And he said, it's so pretty, make your eyes water. And so we moved to Sedona, Arizona. So we tell all our sponsees, while we're moving, they were up in arms. Now it's like citizens with pitchforks, you can't leave. Now I'm on step 5. Why is it if the sponsor gets a chance to move to Sedona, it's an opportunity. If the sponsor gets the same opportunity, it's a betrayal. So anyway, so we left kind of in the middle of the night. We just hit the road. We go there, and we lived in a nearby town, and we go in there, and the meeting was terrible. I go to a meeting the first day, and Irene stayed home with the kid. And it's a little clubhouse, and was a coupon meeting where they pull coupons. And they pulled my coupon, so I shared, and I said, I'm Charlie Hill, I'm an alcoholic, I just moved here. My sponsor told me that I should get some phone numbers, so I'd like to pass around a meeting list, and if you could get some phone numbers, that'd be great. So it goes around the room, it comes back, I open it up, and it's blank. There's not one number. And I poked this little biker girl next to me and said, look at this. And she goes, oh, geez. Next day, my little sweet blonde-haired sweetie goes in there. Hi, I'm just new here, and I need to get some phone numbers. She passes it around, and 11 guys put their phone number on there. So I called them. And I called up Dave Hams. I said, what do I do? He says, you know what to do. You just newcomers and visitors, man. When the visitor shows up, find out why they're there. Hey, Ogden, glad you're here. I hope to see another meeting. What brings you here? And then they would get into a conversation, and all of a sudden I'm sponsoring somebody. And a fellowship grew up around me. He said that's the only way to change a meeting. He says it's really hard to change a meeting from the outside. If I'd have gone in there and say, well, the way we do it in the Pacific group, nobody wants to hear that. But if I can start sponsoring guys, and now they're wearing collars and they're standing at the front of the line and they're doing service work, because I'm doing service work, they'll do what you do if they want what you got. So that's what we did. 3.5 years later, we got a job opportunity in Cabo San Lucas, Mexico. So I went down there, and it was great. The meeting was real tiny, and it was in the Hacienda Hotel. And our job was to go around to the resorts, and we would leave our number. And then if somebody wanted to go to an AA meeting, they would call us. Because if they got in a cab and said, I want to go to an AA meeting, they might wind up at a whorehouse or something, If they call me, we're going to pick them up, take them to the meeting, feed them tacos, and take them back to the resort. Cabo is a very slippery place. And that's what we did. About 3 years later, we decided to move to Sisters, Oregon. I don't know if anybody's been there, but Snow-capped mountains from horizon to horizon. Beautiful. And we get there and they're not doing it right. The worst. And same thing. To change it, you just can't go to a business meeting and say, I think there's some flaws here. I think we need to change something. It's much easier to change it by sponsoring guys and getting them to do what you do. It's just how we've done it. So we did that. I'll blast right through this real quick. We did it there. We did it one cold day. We were in Boca Raton, Florida, and there was a sign that said apartment for rent on the water, and we wanted to know what it cost. It was on Sweetwater Lane, Stevie, and we went in there to check it out, and it was $775 a month. The ocean's right there, right? And I thought, this is God's will. So we sold everything and moved there. And we went there, we went to a meeting, and they weren't doing it right. And it's just been the same thing every time. We go do the same thing. We get a fellowship to go up around us by being of service and by welcoming the newcomer, and especially the visitor, because you don't know why they're there. This is a beautiful place. And when people come here and they say they're visiting from somewhere, and we don't ask them why, maybe they're here to sort out their parents' stuff because something terrible has happened, or they're getting ready to put them in a home or something like this. Not always something fun. So we go to... We went from there, we went to Jupiter, because it's cool to say you're from Jupiter. And then I got a job offer back in Cabo San Lucas, went to work there for 1 year, made so much money, I haven't worked a day since. And from there, we retired in Todos Santos, Mexico. Cute little town on the Pacific side, maybe a couple thousand people. There were 5 alcoholics in the meeting. We had meetings 6 days a week. So Irene and I made 7, and 2 of them didn't like us. You'll notice that if you move around. That doesn't matter how big. There's always someone that doesn't like you. You got a room full of 100 people, there's always one that don't like you. The trick is to not go, I got to change that guy's mind. I got to work on that guy. So, but we stayed there, and then we got a phone call from my mom, and she said to my sister, who 12-stepped me in the program, was going to pass. She had a week to live. And I got a big book. I'm in cabin 39, and I have a first edition printed in 1948, which you're more than welcome to come by and rifle through and see the differences. Just come by and check it out. But she 12-stepped me into this deal. And she was going to die in a week. So we loaded up and drove to Vegas. And we get there, and my sister did the only thing she ever did on time. She was not a punctual person, and she died in a week. And while she was busy dying, my stepdad, that my mom married and was married to for 34 years, went to the hospital and got MRSA, the super virus, and he died. So she died on the 7th, and he died on the 20th. So before Christmas of '07, my mom buries her daughter, my sister, and her husband, and she's all alone. And she's a little 82-year-old woman. What am I going to do? We stayed. I went to meetings there. I went to a morning meeting. I'm not going to say what the meeting was because I'm fixing to talk bad about it. We go to the meeting, and Irene and I, and my sponsor, Dick Tucson, my Vegas sponsor, was taking us to these morning meetings. We go there, and they say, any visitors? I go, yeah, I'm Charlie, an alcoholic from Todos Santos, Mexico. Irene, alcoholic, Todos Santos, Mexico. Oh, that's great. And then they just talked about Todos Santos. They kind of trashed it a little bit. Nobody ever called on us, and no one ever asked us why we were there. We were there to bury my family. Nobody asked. And that stuck with me. If somebody comes to Bokeelia, please, if somebody comes to Bokeelia, that's the second thing out of my mouth after I point you to the traffic, is what brings you here? What brings you here? So, I wanted to go back home. But my mom, 82, deaf, and had a blind watchdog. So we stayed. We stayed and we sold our stuff in Mexico. We got a house and we had it on 2 levels, and my mom lived on one part and Irene and I lived on the other. And we took care of her. She got dementia and Alzheimer's. During the pandemic, she wanted to hug everybody, and we wound up buying a houseboat and moving onto it to keep her from having to do that. We took care of her until she didn't know where she was. And then when she didn't know for sure where she was, Irene said, let's do it again. And she said, let's pick a beautiful place we've never been to before and go there and do the same thing. So we picked Bokeelia, Florida on Google Earth. And if you're going to look for it, that's the best way to look for it. You really see what it's like. There's no buildings over 35 feet high on the whole island. It's idyllic. It's really something. And we moved there. We told her we were on vacation. So we took care of her for like 16 years. And went to the meetings. They weren't doing it right. Our life has been absolutely perfect. It's just been perfect. To think with what has happened to me and the kind of sponsorship I had. Clancy sponsored me for most of my sobriety. Clancy was a perfect guy for me at that time. He didn't mess with me. Just maybe a sentence or two to get me dialed in the way I'm supposed to be. And the main thing he told me is that if you boil all of this stuff down, you're talking about love and service. That Alcoholics Anonymous is, if you just boil the whole thing down, it's love and service. Love and service. I love each and every one of you. Absolutely. And I don't know if I like y'all, because I haven't hung out with you long enough. But I absolutely love you, because you understand me when nobody else does. You know, there's so much going on this weekend with the steps and the workshops, and all that's everything. That is everything. The work that I put into this program is what gave me what I have today. That's everything. And it's such a great deal here. If I'm looking around the room and I'm looking at old timers, and here's an old timer, he's going, if you want what we have, I don't do what he's doing. I'll pick a guy who's having a good time, and his face and his voice and his eyes and his actions all match, and I'll find out what he's doing, and I'll get what he's got. So I got to build myself here in Alcoholics Anonymous. The person I am is because of you. There's 2 things, goals that I have. One is to become transparent. And what that means is, if you like me, it's because you like me. It's not because you like something I'm trying to be so you'll like me. If you like me, we can have a long, long friendship because you like me. And if you don't like me, that's okay, because if you like everybody in AA, you're just not going to enough meetings. You need to get out there some more. But I love you because you understand me. Normal people don't understand us. We can't talk to normal people, and they'll say, oh, that's so sad. They don't understand us. When I took that drink on Christmas Eve, where I was going to get to see my kids, which I have a good relationship with now, by the way. I was going to get to see my kids on Christmas Day, and I took that drink of scotch. A normal person wants to know why. You don't. You know why I took it. You know why I would take that at the worst possible moment. The normal people don't understand us. And I can prove it. I puked in my pants once. Well, I was sitting on a toilet. You know. At the time when it happened, I didn't just take my pants off and throw up in a minute. If I said that at the board of realtors, they would be disgusted. But when I say it with you, with my people, I get laughter, and people nod their heads like, yeah, I can see that happening, you know. And because of that, I absolutely love you. And all it means is that maybe I don't like your delivery. Maybe you're a little too stiff. Maybe you're pounding the book too much or whatever. Maybe I don't like you. If you called me up and said, Charlie, I'm thinking about drinking, could we talk? I would absolutely stop what I was doing and we would talk. And I know that if maybe I'm too happy for you, but if I called you up and said, man, I'm thinking about drinking, can you help me? Will you talk to me? Thanks. Yeah.